Mobutu Sese Seko, who called himself the guide of the Congolese Revolution, led the Democratic Republic of Congo, formerly Zaire, from 1965 to 1997. His time in power brought about significant political and social changes with long-lasting effects. His journey to leadership was shaped by his early life, education, and military training. This video explores the early years of Mobutu Sese Seko, including his upbringing, education, military training, and the influential factors that set him on the path to national leadership. Mobutu Sese Seko was born Joseph Désiré Mobutu on October 14, 1930, in the village of Lisala, situated in the Equateur region of the Belgian Congo. His early life was deeply intertwined with the realities of colonial rule in the area. His father, a member of the Bandi tribe, was a chief administrator in the village, while his mother hailed from a modest family. Mobutu's childhood was shaped mainly by the traditional values and customs of his Bandi heritage, fostering a strong sense of cultural identity, which later played a crucial role in his leadership style. He received his early education in the village's local school, where he demonstrated a keen interest in learning and excelled academically. Notably, his early education focused on the principles of traditional African culture, which instilled a sense of pride in his heritage and a desire to champion indigenous African identity. This early exposure to traditional African values would later play an essential role in his political ideology, forming the foundation for his authenticité philosophy. Mobutu's thirst for knowledge and his ambitions for a better life led him to pursue further education at the prestigious Institut Supérieur Pédagogique, ISP, in the capital city of Leopoldville, now Kinshasa. Established by the Belgian colonial administration, this institution provided secondary education emphasizing academic rigor and European values. While at the ISP, Mobutu was exposed to a broader spectrum of perspectives and ideologies, contributing to his expanding worldview. However, Mobutu's educational journey took an unexpected turn when he opted to join the Belgian colonial army in 1949. This decision, prompted by the allure of a more promising future and a sense of duty, marked a pivotal point in his life. The military experience provided Mobutu with rigorous discipline, leadership training, and valuable practical skills, which would prove invaluable in his subsequent political career. He rose rapidly through the ranks, showcasing his natural abilities and potential as a leader. While serving in the Belgian army, Mobutu received significant guidance and mentorship from several influential figures. He encountered individuals who held contrasting perspectives on colonialism and African political development. Some actively promoted colonial rule and its benefits for African nations, while others advocated for the liberation movement and the establishment of independent African countries. These contrasting views exposed Mobutu to different political ideologies and significantly shaped his evolving political outlook. His stint in the military also led him to the world of journalism. Mobutu's sharp intellect, articulate communication skills, and ability to connect with people led him to a career as a journalist, where he actively critiqued colonial practices and the injustices faced by Africans. His work as a journalist further exposed him to the complexities of political discourse and the power of media as a tool for social commentary and political activism. This experience would later prove instrumental in his cunning manipulation of media and propaganda to consolidate his rule. The burgeoning independence movement in the Belgian Congo catalyzed Mobutu's political awakening. As the Congo moved closer to independence, Mobutu's military experience and journalistic background positioned him as a prominent figure in the emerging political landscape. Utilizing his platform as a journalist, he became a vocal advocate for Congolese self-determination and the end of colonial rule. His eloquent speeches and writings quickly gained him a following among the Congolese people, establishing him as a prominent figure in the fight for independence. Mobutu's political ambitions led him to join the newly formed Mouvement National Congolais (MNC), led by Patrice Lumumba. Within the MNC, he initially played a crucial role in organizing support for Lumumba's campaign for independence. He utilized his popularity and charisma to rally the masses behind Lumumba's vision for a free and independent Congo. Following Congo's independence in 1960, the country descended into chaos and instability. a series of political and economic crises erupted, culminating in a military coup led by Colonel Joseph Mobutu in 1965. This meticulously planned and executed coup marked a significant turning point in Congolese history. Using his military expertise and political cunning, Mobutu successfully seized power, effectively ending Lumumba's political influence and ushering in a new era under his leadership. Mobutu's seizure of power was a testament to his strategic thinking and ability to capitalize on political discord. He skillfully exploited the internal power struggles within the government and expertly manipulated the army's loyalty, ensuring his success and establishing himself as the new leader of the Congo. You are watching a video on the channel Biography Journey. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so we can reach 100,000 subscribers soon. Thank you very much. After consolidating his position, Mobutu embarked on a systematic transformation of the Congolese political landscape. He dissolved all existing political parties and established the Mouvement Populaire de la Révolution, MPR, as the sole legal political party. This move, driven by his desire for complete control and a centralized system of government, effectively eliminated any potential for dissent or opposition. Establishing a one-party state allowed Mobutu to control all aspects of political power, ensuring his absolute authority and suppressing any challenges to his rule. His regime was based on authenticité, cultural and political philosophy that aimed to promote Congolese culture and identity while rejecting Western influence. This philosophy served as Mobutu's ideological foundation and became a ubiquitous element of his rule, influencing all facets of Congolese life. The establishment of the MPR marked the beginning of Mobutu's authoritarian rule. He meticulously crafted a political system that eradicated any semblance of democratic principles or practices. The MPR, tightly controlled by Mobutu, became the sole conduit for political participation, allowing him to manipulate the party structure and ensure his continued control. The MPR's hierarchical framework operated as a means to control the population and discourage any dissent. Each region of the country was assigned a party secretary, who was responsible for overseeing party activities and implementing Mobutu's policies at the local level. This network of party officials acted as his eyes and ears, ensuring his control over information flow and suppressing any potential challenges to his authority. In 1967, Mobutu adopted a new constitution, further solidifying his authoritarian regime. This document, designed to legitimize his grip on power, declared the MPR the sole legal political party, establishing the foundation for Mobutu's one-party state. The constitution enshrined Mobutu's position as president, granting him extensive executive powers and minimizing the role of other branches of government. The constitution also introduced the concept of national orientation, cornerstone of Mobutu's political ideology. This concept, rooted in his authenticité philosophy, aimed to guide the nation's political and social development toward cultural revival and national unity. However, this notion served as a facade, hiding the reality of political repression and the systematic suppression of dissent under Mobutu's rule. Mobutu, a master of political maneuver and adept at controlling information, remained in power for over 3 decades. His rule was a testament to his ability to maintain control over the army and the party, 2 pillars of his regime. He skillfully utilized a combination of political patronage, propaganda, and suppression to ensure his longevity in office. He also adeptly manipulated foreign support, particularly from Western powers, to maintain his regime and suppress any internal challenges to his authority. Mobutu's control over the MPR allowed him to appoint loyalists to essential positions within the government and security forces, ensuring continued support flow. He strategically utilized patronage to buy the loyalty of crucial individuals, reinforcing his grip on power. By controlling the levers of power and silencing dissent, he secured his grip on the levers of power and remained in office for decades. Mobutu's leadership style can be most accurately described as authoritarian, characterized by a complete concentration of power in his hands and suppressing dissent or opposition. He ruled through fear, patronage, and manipulation, silencing any voices that dared to challenge his authority. A pervasive climate of fear characterized Mobutu's rule, The secret police, under his direct control, were notorious for their brutal tactics and their willingness to eliminate any perceived threat. Opposition figures were often subjected to arbitrary arrests, torture, and imprisonment, forcing individuals to conform or face the consequences. Mobutu's regime cultivated a personality cult, elevating him to a revered leader and promoting an image of national unity and progress. He meticulously orchestrated a media campaign, controlling all forms of information and shaping public perception through government-controlled media outlets. Mobutu's name was strategically incorporated into everything from street names and government buildings to national institutions and cultural events, a deliberate effort to solidify his image as the embodiment of the Congolese nation. He presented himself as a strong leader, a unifier of the country, and a protector of national interests. Mobutu's commitment to centralizing power was evident in all aspects of government. He established a highly centralized administrative system, undermining local autonomy and consolidating control over all national institutions. This weakened regional governance and the erosion of democratic principles, further entrenching Mobutu's power. Mobutu also controlled the military and security forces, ensuring his direct control over the instruments of power. His loyalty within these institutions and his manipulation of the military's internal power struggles allowed him to eliminate any threats to his authority effectively. One of Mobutu's most significant economic policies was the Zaireanization program, implemented in the 1970s. This program aimed to transfer ownership of businesses from foreigners to Congolese citizens, fostering national economic control and promoting the participation of indigenous Congolese in the economy. In practice, the Zaireanization program faced significant challenges. Corruption, mismanagement, and a lack of skilled personnel hampered the program's effectiveness. The transfer of ownership often resulted in inefficient management and a decline in productivity, ultimately contributing to the deterioration of the Congolese economy. Mobutu's rule also witnessed the implementation of major infrastructure projects to modernize the nation's infrastructure and boost economic growth. These included the construction of roads, bridges, power plants, and transportation networks intended to improve connectivity and facilitate economic development. However, many of these projects were plagued by corruption and mismanagement, leading to delays, cost overruns, and ultimately failure to achieve their objectives. Despite the vast sums invested in these projects, the overall impact on economic development remained limited. The combination of Mobutu's economic policies and authoritarian rule significantly negatively impacted the Congolese economy. Although Mobutu's government invested considerable resources in infrastructure projects, the absence of transparent financial policies and rampant corruption created a climate of economic stagnation. While aimed at promoting Congolese ownership, the Zaireanization program ultimately led to the nationalization of industries and fueled corruption. This resulted in the decline of the manufacturing sector, the depletion of national resources, and a significant reduction in government revenue. Mobutu's regime also faced frequent economic crises, exacerbated by mismanagement, corruption, and a lack of investment in long-term economic development. In the early years of his rule, Mobutu actively participated in the non-aligned movement, aligning himself with international efforts to promote neutrality and independence in the Cold War era. He advocated for non-alignment and sought to minimize the influence of the United States and the Soviet Union in the Congo. However, as the Cold War progressed, Mobutu's stance shifted. He increasingly aligned himself with Western powers, particularly the United States, seeking financial support and military assistance for his regime. This shift in his foreign policy was fueled by both his desire to secure international legitimacy and his awareness of the economic and political benefits of aligning with Western powers. Mobutu's relationship with Western powers, particularly the United States, became a defining aspect of his foreign policy. He courted Western support, utilizing his strategic positioning in the Cold War as a lever to secure international recognition and financial assistance. Mobutu offered the West a strategic ally in Africa, providing them access to valuable natural resources and a stable political environment in a region threatened by communist influence. In return, Western governments, particularly the United States, provided Mobutu with significant financial aid, military assistance, and political support. This support was crucial in maintaining Mobutu's grip on power and sustaining his regime's stability, despite widespread opposition and internal dissent. Despite focusing on aligning with Western powers, Mobutu became involved in regional conflict, most notably the Angolan Civil War. He supported the União Nacional para a Independência Total de Angola, UNITA, rebel group fighting against the Marxist government of Angola. This involvement in the Angolan conflict was driven by Mobutu's desire to counter the spread of communist influence in the region and to secure a favorable outcome for his regime. Mobutu's ideology of authenticité, which aimed to promote Congolese culture and identity, profoundly impacted Congolese society. This philosophy encouraged the rejection of Western cultural influences and emphasized embracing indigenous African traditions and values. Critical aspects of Mobutu's authenticité included the renaming of the country from the Belgian Congo to Zaire, the adoption of traditional clothing by government officials, the promotion of indigenous languages, and the suppression of Western music and cultural expressions. Mobutu's authenticité had a mixed impact on Congolese culture. While it encouraged a sense of national pride and cultural identity, it also stifled creativity and restricted individual expression. The suppression of Western music and cultural influences led to a decline in artistic production and a limited space for cultural innovation. You are watching a video on the channel Biography Journey. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so we can reach 100,000 subscribers soon. Thank you very much. The renaming of the country from the Belgian Congo to Zaire was intended to signify a complete break from the colonial past and to establish a new national identity rooted in African tradition. However, the emphasis on authenticité often served as a tool to silence dissent and to control the cultural landscape, ultimately undermining the potential for genuine cultural development and self-expression. Mobutu's regime implemented social programs to improve access to education and healthcare, particularly in rural areas. These programs, intended to address the historical inequalities and the legacies of colonialism, had a mixed impact on Congolese society. While some improvements in education and healthcare infrastructure were achieved, corruption, mismanagement, and the regime's overall focus on consolidating power undermined the effectiveness of these social programs. The benefits of these reforms were often limited to the urban elite, with rural communities receiving less attention and fewer resources. Mobutu's authoritarian rule faced significant challenges from opposition movements that emerged throughout his reign. These movements, driven by a desire for democratic change and a rejection of Mobutu's brutal regime, operated in secret and faced constant persecution. Opposition groups, often composed of exiled intellectuals, former politicians and dissidents, sought to overthrow Mobutu's regime and establish a democratic government. These groups faced tremendous obstacles, including the presence of a powerful secret police, a pervasive climate of fear, and Mobutu's control over the media and information flow. Mobutu's regime was marred by widespread corruption. Mobutu and his close allies amassed vast fortunes through embezzlement, misappropriation of public funds, and the exploitation of the nation's natural resources. His wealth, estimated to be billions of dollars, stood in stark contrast to the poverty and suffering experienced by the majority of the Congolese population. The widespread corruption undermined government accountability, fueled economic instability, and eroded public trust in the government. Mobutu's enrichment came at the expense of the nation's development, contributing to the country's economic decline and the worsening of living conditions for ordinary Congolese citizens. The economic decline under Mobutu's rule led to widespread poverty, unemployment, and social unrest. The country's infrastructure deteriorated, the manufacturing sector collapsed, and the economy stagnated. These economic problems, exacerbated by rampant corruption and mismanagement, fueled social unrest and led to the rise of armed rebel groups. The growing discontent among the population, fueled by economic hardship, provided fertile ground for opposition movements and rebel groups to emerge. The escalating civil unrest posed a significant threat to Mobutu's regime, ultimately contributing to his downfall in 1997. Mobutu's rule represented a complex and contested aspect of African history. He straddled the line between promoting African independence and embracing authoritarianism, creating an admired and criticized legacy within the context of African decolonization and the broader struggle for self-determination. His early involvement in the Congolese independence movement positioned him as a critical figure in the fight against colonial rule. He emerged as a charismatic leader who championed the cause of African liberation, espousing a vision of a free and independent Congo. This early commitment to African independence resonated with many African leaders and earned him respect within the Pan-African movement. However, Mobutu's authoritarian rule, his embrace of a one-party state, and his disregard for democratic principles contradicted the core ideals of Pan-Africanism. While he initially aligned with anti-colonial forces, his actions, once in power, contradicted the principles of free and fair elections, rule of law, and human rights crucial to genuine Pan-African ideals. His suppression of dissent, manipulation of the media, and control over the political landscape reflected a pattern of authoritarian rule that contrasted with the principles of democracy and human rights that underpinned the Pan-African movement. Mobutu's leadership style, characterized by charismatic leadership, political cunning, and brutal repression, reflected the broader political climate in post-colonial Africa. His regime, marked by a centralized system of governance and the suppression of any form of opposition, mirrored the patterns of authoritarian rule that emerged in many African nations during the Cold War era. Despite his initial alignment with the Pan-African movement, Mobutu's trajectory differed from that of many other African leaders who sought to build democratic institutions, promote economic development. Unlike leaders like Julius Nyerere of Tanzania or Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, who championed Pan-Africanism and democratic principles, Mobutu's rule was defined by authoritarianism and disregarding democratic values. Mobutu skillfully positioned himself as a champion of Congolese identity and a defender of national interests. He promoted populist policies, such as the authenticité philosophy, designed to appeal to the masses and enhance his image as a national leader. However, these populist policies often served as a cover for Mobutu's repressive measures. His regime employed brutal tactics to silence dissent, press opposition, and maintain its grip on power. While he presented himself as a unifier of the nation, his actions often created a climate of fear and intimidation, undermining the principles of national unity he claimed to champion. Mobutu's wealth, amassed through corruption and the exploitation of the nation's resources, stood in stark contrast to the poverty and economic hardship endured by the Congolese people. While he spent lavishly on personal luxuries and accumulated a vast fortune, the country's infrastructure deteriorated, the economy stagnated, and social services remained inadequate. His actions revealed a significant disconnect between his enrichment and the nation's needs. This disparity, a defining characteristic of Mobutu's leadership, fueled resentment and discontent among the Congolese people and contributed to the legitimacy crisis that eventually led to his downfall. Mobutu successfully cultivated a positive international image, presenting himself as a strong African leader and a vital ally of the West. He strategically utilized his relationship with Western powers to secure international recognition and financial support, projecting an image of stability and progress in the Congo. However, the reality within the Congo was vastly different. Mobutu's regime was characterized by corruption, human rights abuses, and the suppression of dissent. The contrast between his carefully cultivated international image and the domestic reality of his rule ultimately undermined his legitimacy and contributed to his downfall. Mobutu Sese Seko married Marie Antoinette Mobutu in 1956. The couple had several children, including a son who, like his father, transitioned from a military career to a political one. This pattern suggests a generational influence, where his leadership and governance principles were passed down. Mobutu was known for his lavish lifestyle and extravagant spending habits, which often contrasted sharply with the poverty endured by the Congolese people. This aspect of his life highlighted the economic inequality that characterized his regime and underlined the stark disconnect between his wealth and the nation's poverty. Beyond his political ambitions, Mobutu had diverse interests. He was an avid traveler, often visiting major Western capitals to secure support for his regime. He was also known to be an accomplished musician and a keen fan of Congolese music. While seemingly detached from his political life, these interests reveal a multifaceted personality that went beyond his public persona. Outside his officially documented interests, there were rumors that he had an adventurous side, going beyond his documented hobbies. This included a fascination with mysticism and a deep belief in traditional African spiritual practices. This side of Mobutu, shrouded in secrecy and speculation, adds another layer of complexity to his already enigmatic character. Mobutu, like many leaders, had distinct personal habits and preferences. He was known for his meticulous attention to detail, individual solid style, and strict protocol adherence. He also profoundly respected tradition and had a strong sense of cultural identity. Mobutu's habits and preferences, while not directly impacting his political decisions, provide insights into his personality, motivations, and approach to leadership. For instance, his preference for tradition and his emphasis on cultural identity influenced his authenticité policy, which aimed to revive Congolese culture and promote a sense of national pride. The fall of Mobutu's regime in 1997 marked the end of an era. In its wake, the DRC embarked on a path of political transition, marked by instability, conflicts, and the challenges of rebuilding democratic institutions and ensuring a peaceful transfer of power. Mobutu's legacy continues to shape the political landscape of the DRC, leaving behind a complex inheritance of authoritarian tendencies, systemic corruption, and a lack of trust in state institutions. Mobutu's regime instilled a culture of patronage and political opportunism, permeating Congolese politics. The legacy of a one-party state, emphasizing centralized power and the suppression of dissent, has contributed to the ongoing challenges of building a functioning democracy in the DRC. Mobutu's rule devastated the Congolese economy, leaving behind a legacy of poverty, unemployment, and a lack of investment in essential services. The economic decline under his regime, exacerbated by rampant corruption and mismanagement, created a climate of poverty and financial hardship for the majority of the Congolese population. The pervasive corruption and mismanagement that characterized Mobutu's rule have had a long-lasting effect on the DRC, hindering economic growth, discouraging investment, and undermining public trust in government institutions. The legacy of these economic practices continues to challenge efforts to rebuild the Congolese economy and to promote equitable economic development. Mobutu's authenticité policy profoundly impacted Congolese culture, promoting a sense of national pride and a return to traditional values. However, it also stifled creative expression and limited the development of a vibrant cultural scene. The suppression of Western music and cultural influences contributed to a decline in artistic production and a limited space for cultural innovation. The cultural legacy of Mobutu's rule is mixed, reflecting the tension between promoting Congolese identity and suppressing artistic expression. While the emphasis on authenticité may have encouraged a sense of national pride, it also created a climate of cultural control that hindered the free flow of ideas and artistic creativity. Mobutu's rule, once seemingly indestructible, began to crumble under increasing internal dissent and external pressure. The growing economic hardships endured by the Congolese people, exacerbated by Mobutu's corruption and mismanagement, fueled widespread dissatisfaction and discontent. International pressure also mounted as Western governments began to distance themselves from Mobutu, criticizing his human rights record and expressing concerns over his regime's corruption. With the decline of the Cold War and the diminishing strategic importance of the Congo, Mobutu lost his unwavering support from Western powers. You are watching a video on the channel Biography Journey. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so we can reach 100,000 subscribers soon. Thank you very much. As Mobutu's grip on power weakened, rebel movements led by Laurent Kabila gained momentum. With internal and external pressure, Kabila's forces advanced on Kinshasa, leading to Mobutu's ultimate downfall and his flight into exile in 1997. Mobutu's flight hastened by the collapse of his once powerful regime, marked the end of his 3-decade rule. His departure signaled the end of an era and opened the way for a new chapter in Congolese history. Mobutu's removal from power ended an era of authoritarian rule and gave the DRC a chance for political and economic transformation. However, the country faced significant challenges transitioning from a dictatorship to a democracy, with widespread corruption, institutional weaknesses, and lingering social inequities complicating the process. The end of Mobutu's rule, while a pivotal moment in Congolese history, did not automatically lead to a peaceful and prosperous future. The legacy of Mobutu's authoritarian rule, his economic mismanagement, and his failure to address the country's underlying social problems cast a long shadow over the DRC and its prospects for achieving long-term stability, economic development, and democratic governance. Mobutu's regime was notorious for its systematic suppression of dissent. Opposition leaders, journalists, and critics were subjected to arbitrary arrests, torture, and imprisonment. The secret police, under Mobutu's control, operated with impunity, silencing any voices that dared to challenge his authority. This systematic suppression of dissent stifled the development of a free and open society and the growth of democratic institutions. The brutality of Mobutu's regime created a climate of fear and intimidation, forcing individuals to conform or face dire consequences. This suppression of dissent undermined the fundamental human rights of freedom of speech, assembly, and expression, creating a culture of silence and repression that stifled the growth of a democratic society. The use of torture was a common practice in Mobutu's prisons. Political critics, dissidents, and opposition figures were often subjected to brutal interrogation methods designed to extract confessions and to break the will of those who dared to challenge the regime. These methods included beatings, electrocution, waterboarding, and other forms of physical and psychological abuse. Political imprisonment, often without due process, became a tool for silencing dissent. Individuals who opposed the regime, expressed critical views, or simply aroused the suspicion of Mobutu's security forces were routinely detained in overcrowded and unsanitary prisons, where they were subjected to torture, abuse, and inhumane conditions. Mobutu's regime effectively dismantled the pillars of a free and open society, decimating civil liberties and eroding the fundamental freedoms of citizens. His control over the media, suppression of dissent, and the use of torture and political imprisonment created a climate of fear that stifled open debate, critical thinking, and independent journalism. The absence of a free press, the intimidation of opposition leaders, and the suppression of civil society organizations effectively silenced any voices that dared to challenge Mobutu's authority. This pervasive climate of repression undermined the very foundations of a democratic society, creating a system in which Mobutu's power was absolute and unchallenged. Mobutu strategically navigated the Cold War, initially aligning with the non-aligned movement, but later shifting allegiance to the West, particularly the United States. His desire to secure financial and military support for his regime motivated this shift. This move ultimately prioritized his survival over the long-term interests of the Congolese people. Mobutu's reliance on Western powers and his willingness to align with their interests had a long-lasting impact on Congolese foreign policy. It created a dependence on external powers, hindering the development of an independent and self-sufficient foreign policy and undermining the Congo's ability to pursue its national interests. Role in regional conflicts. Mobutu's involvement in regional conflicts, most notably the Angolan Civil War, demonstrated his willingness to support groups aligned with his political objectives, even if it meant furthering instability and bloodshed in neighboring countries. His actions in Angola, while seemingly driven by strategic considerations, ultimately contributed to the complex and protracted nature of the conflict. Mobutu's foreign policy, marked by a combination of strategic realpolitik and self-interest, contributed to the region's instability, further hindering the pursuit of peaceful solutions and sustainable development in the Great Lakes region. Despite successfully manipulating international relations to secure support and legitimacy for his regime, Mobutu's diplomatic legacy is primarily seen as a mixture of pragmatism and self-interest. His willingness to prioritize his interests over those of the Congolese people, coupled with his embrace of authoritarianism, led to a legacy of political instability, economic stagnation, and human rights abuses within the Congo. Mobutu's diplomatic legacy, while reflecting the complexities of Cold War politics and the strategic importance of the Congo, ultimately contributed to the country's prolonged struggles for stability and economic development. His actions, driven by a complex mix of pragmatism, ambition, and a disregard for the needs of his people, have left a lasting impact on the political trajectory and international standing of the Democratic Republic of Congo. A pervasive and systemic system of corruption characterized Mobutu's regime. He and his close collaborators engaged in widespread embezzlement of public funds, misappropriation of national resources, and the exploitation of the Congolese people. Mobutu utilized his control over state institutions and the national economy to line his pockets and enrich his loyalists at the expense of the nation's development. The corruption was so widespread and deeply entrenched that it came to define the very nature of Mobutu's rule, creating what was known as a kleptocracy, a system of government where corruption and self-enrichment were the primary motivations and the defining characteristics of the regime. Mobutu's wealth, estimated to be billions of dollars, stood in stark contrast to the abject poverty and lack of essential services experienced by the Congolese people. His extravagant spending on personal luxuries and his lavish lifestyle showcased a blatant disregard for the needs and well-being of the nation. This stark disparity between Mobutu's enrichment and the poverty of the Congolese people ignited public resentment and fueled the growing discontent that ultimately led to his downfall. While Mobutu's regime invested in infrastructure projects, these often served to line his loyalists' pockets rather than genuinely promote economic development. The pervasive corruption, rampant misappropriation of funds, and the lack of transparency in financial dealings undermined any meaningful efforts to address the country's economic challenges and crippled the potential for sustainable growth. Since Mobutu fell from power, numerous efforts have been made to recover the stolen wealth he had amassed during his rule. These efforts have involved legal battles, asset seizures, and international cooperation to track and seize the vast fortunes illegally acquired through corruption and embezzlement. While these recovery efforts have yielded some successes, they have also faced significant challenges, including the complexity of international legal procedures, difficulty tracing assets, and the involvement of influential individuals and institutions who benefited from Mobutu's corrupt regime. Despite the challenges, the ongoing efforts to recover stolen wealth highlight the enduring consequences of Mobutu's corrupt rule and the continuing struggle to address the legacy of his regime. Mobutu's grip on power was further solidified through his absolute control over the media and the flow of information. He nationalized all media outlets, ensuring they operated as government propaganda machines. Criticism of his regime was strictly forbidden, and journalists who dared to dissent were imprisoned, silenced, or worse. This control over the media allowed Mobutu to present a highly sanitized and distorted picture of the reality within the Congo, while simultaneously suppressing any opposition voices that might challenge his authority. The government-controlled media outlets were used to promote Mobutu's image as a charismatic leader, highlighting his accomplishments and downplaying any negative aspects of his rule. The media campaign, replete with carefully curated messages and propaganda, ensured that a favorable narrative dominated the public discourse, further entrenching Mobutu's grip on power. Mobutu's regime employed a range of repressive tactics to silence dissent and maintain control. The secret police, known as the Presidential Guard and the Special Presidential Division, operated with absolute impunity, conducting arbitrary arrests, interrogations, torture, and executions aimed at eliminating any perceived threat to the regime. Pervasive climate of fear, created by Mobutu's repressive tactics, stifled any possibility of organized opposition or dissent. This environment of fear effectively silenced critics, discouraged public opposition, and forced individuals to conform to the regime's rules or face dire consequences. Mobutu meticulously constructed a personality cult around himself, using propaganda and media manipulation to elevate his image to a near-divine status. He presented himself as the embodiment of the Congolese nation, the guide of the Congolese revolution, and a symbol of national unity and progress. His image was ubiquitous on billboards, posters, stamps, and currency. His name was incorporated into place names, institutions, and government programs. This constant and pervasive presence of Mobutu's image reinforced his authority and cultivated a perception of his omnipresence and invincibility. Mobutu's legacy is a subject of ongoing debate and analysis among historians and political scientists. Some scholars view him as a complex figure who played a crucial role in shaping the Congolese national identity, promoting a sense of African pride and resisting Western influence. Others critically examine his reign, highlighting his authoritarian practices, rampant corruption, and the negative impact of his rule on the Congolese economy, society, and political landscape. They point to the widespread human rights abuses, the systematic suppression of dissent, and the legacy of instability and poverty that have continued to plague the DRC. Mobutu's legacy is contested in popular memory. Some Congolese citizens still view him as a national hero, remembering his role in shaping national identity, promoting authenticité, and resisting colonial rule. Others remember him with resentment and anger, recalling his authoritarian rule, his rampant corruption, and the suffering inflicted upon the Congolese people. The public perception of Mobutu is shaped by a complex interplay of historical narratives, individual experiences, and personal interpretations of his impact on the country. This mixed perception reflects the complexities of his legacy, showcasing both admiration for his pursuit of national independence and condemnation of his authoritarian practices. Mobutu's reign provides valuable lessons for future leaders. The importance of transparent governance, respect for human rights, and promoting democratic principles are key takeaways. His legacy is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the corrosive impact of corruption, and the negative consequences of authoritarian rule. Lessons from Mobutu's reign emphasize the importance of prioritizing the people's welfare, rights, and needs, while fostering a climate of respect for democratic principles, individual freedom, and human rights. You are watching a video on the channel Biography Journey. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so we can reach 100,000 subscribers soon. Thank you very much. Mobutu Sese Seko's reign as president of the Democratic Republic of Congo left a deeply contested legacy that continues to shape the country's politics, economy, and social fabric. While he championed African identity, independence, and national pride, his repressive authoritarian rule, widespread corruption, and economic mismanagement cast a long shadow over his tenure. As future leaders and scholars reflect on Mobutu's career and historical significance, they must grapple with the complexities of his legacy. His rule is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the need for transparent governance, and the imperative of upholding human rights and democratic principles in leadership. Ultimately, the story of Mobutu Sese Seko underscores the enduring impact of autocratic leadership, the perils of corruption and repression, and the profound challenges of post-colonial state-building in Africa. His presidency is a stark reminder of the delicate balance between power and accountability, the complexities of national identity, and the enduring struggle for democracy and justice in the Democratic Republic of Congo.